and welcome back. Today is another true crime video, though unlike previous videos, this crime is alleged. It has not been prosecuted, no one's been arrested, no one's been charged, and as far as I can tell that probably won't happen, but I thought it was interesting and that listeners of my channel might be interested in hearing about this scam. So at the center of the alleged scam is Spotify. Spotify is a online music streaming service. I assume most people have heard of Spotify if you have YouTube, but it's possible some countries block Spotify and not YouTube. But it's a music streaming service. They don't have their own artists. They don't produce music. They license music from artists, or more often from music houses, music industry, like Sony, for example. They license the music, put it on their platform, and then people can listen to it. I personally don't really use Spotify. I started listening to it this summer, but mostly I just listen to MP3s that I personally own. So I'm not like a Spotify super user. This scam involving Spotify is unlike others. There are plenty of scams using Spotify. So for example, if you are an artist and you get your music on Spotify, you might want to bump up your numbers to get, more money, more exposure. So you can pay people who have bots or whatever to bump up your numbers and just stream your music 24/7. That's a scam. Spotify isn't running that scam. The alleged scam I want to talk about today is actually a scam that is run by Spotify, according to these reports. The reporting started in 2016. They picked up steam in 2017, but there hasn't been anything else on it that I could find since 2019. So possibly this alleged scam ran its course and Spotify stopped doing it, or the media just didn't really care. I'm not sure. Again, as someone who doesn't use Spotify that often, I didn't feel savvy enough to go searching to see if there was evidence of it still going on. But as late as 2019, it did appear to still be happening. At least parts of the alleged scam that were happening for certain. Parts of it are presumed by other people, and that's kind of where we get into the white collar crime aspect. So again, none of this has been proven. All of it's been denied by Spotify. Okay, so let's get into it. Going into this, I thought that I understood how Spotify paid its artists, but I was incorrect. So what I assumed was that it was pretty much like YouTube. Although, now that I've researched this a little bit, I wonder if I'm wrong about YouTube too. But basically, if someone listens to a stream, the artist gets a royalty, something really, really small. So let's say I listen to Halo by Beyonce. Each time I listen to it, Beyonce gets 1/1000th of a penny or something, right? So the more plays I give Beyonce, the more money she makes from my listens. This is not entirely correct. It's not based on total number of plays. The amount an artist gets paid is based on the percentage of streams captured. So basically, Spotify has a dollar amount that they're going to pay out total for the pay period. So let's say for this month, they're going to pay $1 billion to every artist, cumulative $1 billion for every artist on Spotify, and they decide how to allocate that money based on the percentage of streams that an artist got. So let's say Taylor Swift got 30% of streams this month, she gets 30% of that $1 billion. That's even if this month maybe she got less plays than last month, but maybe last month more people were listening to music total. So it's not quite as straightforward as like every time you listen to Halo by Beyonce, she gets 1,000th of a penny. And what this means is if I listen to Taylor Swift songs just as often as I listen to Beyonce songs, I'm kind of canceling them out. Not completely, because of course there's more than 2 artists on Spotify, right? So they're not entirely canceled out. But that's what I mean, where it's a percentage and it's not based on just total number of streams. This is really important for how the alleged scam supposedly worked. So just keep that in mind. As a side note, a song is counted as a stream if it gets played for more than 30 seconds. So it has to reach that 30-second mark. This was good for me to learn because sometimes, you reach the end of a song and I'm just ready for the next one and I hit skip and I feel a little bit bad thinking like, oh no, did they get paid for that? But they do. So that's both good news for my own personal anxiety, but also relevant for something I'm going to bring up later. Okay, so let's get to the scam. The music industry has a very long history of crime, especially in the US. So basically in the US, as soon as we had radio stations and disc jockeys running those radio stations, we had bribery. It was actually called payola. There was a huge backlash against it before I was born, but it was like the standard. If you wanted to get played on the radio, you bribed disc jockeys. That was how it worked. Bribery was the only way to get anywhere in the music industry. Now that was cleaned up a bit, and again, this was in the US. Spotify is a Swedish company, which matters, and the alleged scam with Spotify is actually kind of the opposite of what I just said. So instead of musicians, or really their industry labels, bribing disc jockeys to get on the air, Spotify is choosing to promote fake artists in order to pay less money total to all artists on Spotify. So they're trying, this is the alleged scam. Again, this was never proven, so this is possibly the explanation for a phenomenon that definitely did happen. Okay, so how was this scam detected? It started as people got curious about what are referred to as fake artists on Spotify. And so, what do they mean by fake? Well, there are 2 kinds of fake artists on Spotify. One is someone who is pretending to be someone else. So they steal their name. I think this is really common with rappers, is they steal somebody's name. They make an album, they put it on Spotify, and occasionally they are able to trick Spotify into thinking that they are the more popular artist, at least for a time, and capture a bunch of listeners that way. That's not who I'm talking about today. That's, again, a scam that's run by those individual artists. These fake artists were artists on Spotify who didn't really exist. What's meant by this is, of course, there was a human somewhere who wrote the music and a human somewhere who performed it. But when you look at the artist credit on Spotify, it would take you to a page of a person with generic art and a name that didn't correspond to anyone. If you tried to search for this person, you would find no social media presence at all. Their Spotify page was pretty much it. These artists tended to have a handful of songs, 6. And the thing is, if you are an aspiring musician, You want as much exposure as possible. You want to have a Facebook page, maybe a YouTube channel, a Twitter. You want people to be able to find you, to buy your music, to buy your tickets to your concerts, to become fans, and, you know, to make you money so that you can keep being a musician. These artists didn't have any of that. They didn't exist outside of Spotify. The other interesting facts about them is that most of them had Swedish names, and most of the music was niche, like ambient music, trance music, smooth jazz. So these weren't aspiring pop stars. And very, very key to this, all of their songs had been placed on Spotify mood or activity playlists. So Spotify has these playlists that are not algorithmically generated. They claim that they are hand-picked songs that, make up a mood, like sleepy time or chill or playful piano. Again, they're not algorithmically generated. They are made by real people. And these playlists get a lot of hits. On your Spotify dashboard, there are these playlists ready for you. I do think the ones that show you might be determined by your listening habits, but the playlists themselves, again, are not algorithmically generated. And, they're popular. It's nice when you go to, your basically radio to listen to new music you haven't heard of before, to not have the work of making a playlist be entirely on you. Or again, if you're looking for something to sleep to and you want 8 hours of quiet music or thunderstorm sounds, to have that 8 hours already ready for you. So these are popular. People listen to them. And artists cannot pay Spotify to be featured on them. Spotify does not offer this. I don't know if that's actually enforced because of, again, things like payola. I don't know if it's like a legal thing, but either way, it is their policy that you cannot pay to be on one of those playlists. And the spots are coveted because, again, you can really bolster your stream count if you are included. It's a big deal. So, for these artists who have zero internet presence and are pseudonyms and aren't out there promoting their music, it's awfully strange that all of their songs were on these curated playlists. And that's what really sparked people's skepticism and anger. Really, a lot of people were fairly angry about this. So, who were these artists? Well, the initial reporting was done by Music Business World, and most of the reporting was done by Music Business World, which is a European music journal. And they, at the beginning, back in 2016 and then in 2017, counted over 50 of these artists. I think they eventually stopped counting, but they did count at least 50. And through some sleuthing, they eventually realized that they were all signed to a company called Epidemic Sound, which is a Swedish music production house. So again, this is where we get the Swedish connection, and there's actually one more. But we've got Spotify, which is a Swedish company, Epidemic Sound, a Swedish company, and all of these fake artists. So, okay, these artists are signed by some Swedish house, but Spotify still has to pay them, right? So what does promoting their music get Spotify? Well, the accusation here is that Spotify and Epidemic Sound have a special contract which results in the songs by the fake artists costing Spotify less money. So let's say for each stream Spotify has a deal with Epidemic Sound that they'll only pay 50% of what they would pay for a song by a Sony artist, for example. That means that if these fake artists are getting 10% of total streaming traffic, but Spotify is paying them only half of what they would pay to other artists, Spotify just gets to keep that difference. Now again, this is alleged. These are suspicions of people in the industry. Spotify has denied all of this, but this is the idea behind what people think was the scam, why they think these fake artists existed, and why they think Spotify was promoting them so heavily. And an anonymous ex-Spotify employee was quoted by Variety as saying, "It's one of a number of internal initiatives to lower the royalties Spotify is paying to major labels." So that sounds like a confirmation of the alleged scam by an ex-employee. But again, this is an anonymous person. They don't work there anymore. So take a grain of salt on what they're saying. So that's what's in it for Spotify. Spotify is saving themselves money because, again, if they do it by percentages, they don't pay per stream. They can essentially dilute the stream, dilute the pool of artists that they're paying appropriately. So in terms of whether this was working, Rolling Stone looked at this in 2019 and they found that 50 identified fakes, so not all of them, but they looked at 50 of them, had 3 billion streams between them. And to compare, at the time of writing in 2019, Rolling Stone said that Beyonce, Lorde, and One Direction all had fewer than 1.2 billion streams each. So we've got these 50 fake artists who are unknown, whose names you wouldn't recognize, who altogether had more than twice as many streams as Beyonce, a name that everybody knows. What this means is that these playlists were very, very successful in increasing the number of streams for these artists and for everyone else on the playlist too, I have to imagine. But again, we're talking about people with zero internet following because they don't exist outside of Spotify. And so now you might be thinking well, why would Epidemic Sound agree to this? What's their deal? So let's talk about Epidemic Sound. They are a Swedish startup that specializes in making music for content creators. So their main thing actually is making music that might go in videos like this one. I don't use music in my videos because it's ASMR, and I know people have differing opinions on that. But basically what content creators can do is have a monthly subscription to their service and go through their catalog and use whatever music they want for their content. You can also purchase music individually, but they have said that most people do subscriptions. Their company is not well liked by the music industry because the way that they pay their artists isn't a way that most people like, and they ban artists who are in unions from working for them, which is always kind of a sketchy move. But they have been very successful, according to their CEO. He says that YouTube videos using their sound stream over 1 billion hours a month. And that's just YouTube. I mean, it's not just YouTube content creators. There's also TikTok, obviously. Whatever, anyone using content. Apparently different European TV stations, news stations, have been using their content. So it's really common. They're doing a good job, I guess, or they're making a lot of money. They're making a lot of sales. So what are they getting out of this Spotify situation? Well, Epidemic Sound takes a 50% cut of their artists' streaming royalties. This is legal. There's nothing shady about this. Whether or not it's a good deal for the artists is up for debate. But if they made a deal with Spotify that their royalties would be much lower, than everyone else's, and in return they would get, featured on these playlists. Well, then they would still make a bunch of money, again, for music that they didn't write. So I don't know about the legality of that. That sounds a lot like payola. Basically, we won't charge you as much money if you give us advertising. It's a little quid pro quo, and it is a little sketchy. The EU, I think, has stronger laws against things like this than the US, but I'm not in the EU and I'm not as familiar with how this works. And moreover, there is one more shady and interesting connection here, which is this. Epidemic Sound is partially owned by Cringeflix, a Swedish venture capital firm who is also a major backer of Spotify. So now we have a major Swedish VC firm investing in both Epidemic Sound and Spotify, and we have some sort of deal between the two that is theoretically making both of them more money, saving Spotify money, making Epidemic Sound money. Now, the more kind of legal way of looking at this, the more innocent connection here might be, okay, Epidemic Sound makes ambient music, they don't make it, they hire people to make it, but that's what they provide. And so Spotify is licensing this music specifically for their playlists that have certain ambient sounds, that have certain genres. But Spotify claims that they don't commission music, that that's not how they work. So it's still kind of strange. And certainly Epidemic Sound isn't the only group that does this. There are plenty of other companies that produce music or, buy music to make available for content creators that specialize in certain kinds of music, certain genres, certain ambiances. So this connection still seems shady. But again, the idea that Spotify is paying Epidemic Sound less money for their music, less royalties, and that's why they're promoting their music so heavily. This is all speculated. It is all alleged. There's been no confirmation of this. So, is this still happening? The answer to this is, I don't know. In 2019, there was another article out because not only were these fake artists still around, and there were more of them, they kept changing them up, but a number of people found that if they went into their listening history, they had these fake artists in their history when they had never listened to them. And this was a really interesting thing to find, because a scammer who steals your password could theoretically go into your Spotify, stream a bunch of music from whoever they're trying to make money for, and then, not tell you that they, stole your password. And that happens. That is a scam on Spotify that is not run by Spotify. But for various reasons, people were pointing fingers at Spotify for this one. It didn't seem necessarily like these people had their passwords leaked. It really looked like someone had gone in and changed their history, which someone who worked there would have to do. But again, this was never investigated to my knowledge, though it's not like the EU tells me of their active investigations. And as far as I can tell, nothing came of it. There was, one article, maybe two articles, and nothing since then. So the fake artists were still around. At worst, Spotify was manipulating people's individual listening histories to give more streams to those fake artists. But again, this is alleged and there's not a ton of evidence for it. But tampering with stream listens like that would definitely not be legal if they were doing it. And a final note, Spotify is such a big part of music now. Just one of the reasons I don't use it very often. I don't pay for premium. I just have like my little free account and I make some playlists that way. But I mentioned earlier that songs get paid if you listen for more than 30 seconds. Well, this has driven music to be shorter, especially these kinds of niche ambient sounds music or jazz. People are now making shorter songs that are like 45 seconds to a minute, because if you have an album with 10 songs that are 3 minutes long each versus an album with 20 songs that are a minute and a half each, you get more money for the second one. And that's kind of what people are doing. One of these articles mentioned someone who had a playlist of thunderstorm sounds, and each track of thunderstorm sounds was like 35 seconds long. The idea being that people would fall asleep to them and just blast through as many 35-second tracks as there are in 8 hours. That's going to drive up your revenue compared to, your regular 3-minute song. And again, because this is done as a percentage of captured streams over the course of a pay period, that drives down the revenue for other people, which is just a shame. So yeah, it's possible Spotify has been running scams in order to dilute the music stream percentages and pay out less money. But it's definite that they're doing everything they can to pay artists as little money as possible. And if you do like an artist, the best way to support them is to go on Bandcamp and buy their album, or to buy tickets to concerts, although, only if it's safe where you are, or buy their merch. Merch is a good idea too. So yeah, if you listen to Spotify playlists, it might be worth noticing if the artists involved seem real or not, and let me know, because I would be really curious. I've never listened to those playlists, so I don't know how endemic this is, but it sounds like they're racking up a lot of streams and making Epidemic sound a lot of money. Okay, good night. I would like to say a special thank you to the Grouchow and Alan, who are my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support.